Hey, the other night I did a video on Guitar Center. I went in Guitar Center and there were no elixir strings. You saw that. But I'm going to follow up with some comments since it looks like Guitar Center might be declaring bankruptcy. And I've got some kind of rambling comments, but I wanted to share my thoughts. And the gist of the thoughts, which I really kind of get into more at the end, is that Guitar Center is a great store. It needs to be a rock and roll store and not a corporate store. And people like Bain Capital, they have I looked at their job application. They turn it into a service economy, human resources type of institution like Walgreens or Rite Aid or Best Buy. And that's corporate, that's service economy. And that's the only way that corporate America knows how to hire people and run a place. But in the old days, there was more freedom of the store and there was more of a rock and roll spirit. And anytime you get human resources people and service economy people who see things in terms of a workplace instead of a rock and roll center, you're hurting the brand. And there's Hey, I'm a avid Guitar Center customer, and I uploaded a video the other night about lack of elixir strings and some of the other shortages in our local Guitar Center. And then just a few days later, they declared they're on the verge of declaring bankruptcy. They haven't declared bankruptcy yet. But I kind of wanted to follow up. There have been so many YouTube videos, and I kind of wanted to throw my 2 cents in about Guitar Center. I saw several that just were like, good riddance to Guitar Center. Let's get rid of Guitar Center. They suck. And they're like Best Buy for guitars, and they're like Walmart for guitars. And I get all that. And I kind of want to just give my rambling take on Guitar Center. And I've been kind of following this situation, from afar, like a lot of us, but I do have sort of a perspective on it. You probably know, if you're watching this, they missed a $45 interest payment in October, and they have a month, or they'll be basically, in default on their debts, and they owe a ton of money, like $1.4 billion or something. So I really hope they work it out. I've been seeing all these YouTube videos that talk about how they should, that the future is online. I get that. I buy my guitars online. I've got a bunch of nice guitars. You saw me playing that Highway 1. I love that. I got that used from Guitar Center. I've got a couple nice American Professionals I got from Guitar Center. I've got a bunch of good pedals, and I mean just a bunch of stuff from Guitar Center. They're my main supplier of equipment. So I do feel like I know Guitar Center pretty well. I'm probably one of their better customers in that store. I think, maybe, I don't know. But, it would be a real shame if Guitar Center went out of business. And so some of these people that just are wishing they suck and they would go away. I worry about that because you can't make the guitar again. The guitar is a very special thing in America. It's a product of the rock and roll culture that started with Elvis Presley. Of course, guitar's been around for centuries in some form or fashion. The Spanish guitar and the folk guitar that you might have seen, like guys playing in old Civil War daguerreotypes or something. But the iconic guitar that a lot of us know and love really came of age. They used orchestral guitars and everything. In folk music, they used guitars. But the guitar we know and love came of age with Elvis and then the Beatles. And that's a really special thing. And, it does seem like sometimes that era is passing. And I worry about what's going to replace it. And it's really important that we have stores like Guitar Center where you can walk in. I bought a bunch of guitars from Guitar Center in the last 5 years. I will say, and I bought almost all those over the internet. There were very few that I just walked into the store and bought. I'm a Guitar Center customer, and I usually scope out their website. They did have a nice American Professional off the floor. I bought that, but a lot of the others I ordered used. They've got good used stuff, and the reason I felt very comfortable doing that, there were a couple I bought that I didn't really take to, and I returned them, and they were very good about that. And they've got a super good return policy, just ridiculous. They buy used gear all the time. I've traded in used gear. Sometimes I wonder how they can function with that return policy. They must get so much stuff returned. But then I think about it. I'm sure that the bean counters in Guitar Center higher ups have it all worked out. I'll buy a piece of gear. Maybe a year later, I'll trade it in for something else. So I'm selling it to them at a huge mark down, and plus I'm buying something new. So I'm sure they make their money off that. But it's so important to have a retail outlet with good guitars. So, and the other thing I keep saying is a lot of people say, well, the future is, intermediate level guitars and beginner guitars. I agree with that. I used to teach a lot of guitar, and I know that, a lot of music stores, the lessons and selling the Squiers and the low end Epiphones. Nothing wrong with Squiers or Epiphones, but selling those, kind of entry level guitars are the bread and butter. But I always thought Guitar Center was really a place where you could get really good guitars, and I hope it stays that way. And when you spend, $1,500 or $2,500 or whatever on a good guitar, you want to be able to play it, and that's particularly true if it's used. So I really worry if we just go to Reverb and Amazon. I just don't think that will be the same. I do think there's some valid criticism in this Bain Capital. So Bain Capital bought that company in 2007, 2008, and they proceeded to load it up with debt. And the one thing about a company like Bain is they usually don't care much about guitars, but they do care about brand names, and Guitar Center was a brand name. And if you look at a lot of the list of companies they bought, they're usually recognizable brands, but they're also often recognizable brands that have been in some kind of financial trouble. Maybe Bain would probably buy when the car came out, Bain probably bought the last horse and buggy company, and ran it into the ground. And but the thing you have to realize about Bain is these guys make their money anyway. They get commissions on all those transactions. They get managerial fees for running the company. And if it does go bankrupt, they'll liquidate it, and they'll kind of cash out. So it's kind of really disgusting. The other thing, there's a lot of criticism of the Guitar Center employees. And, one of the things that Guitar Center, I went and looked on their line and pretended I was applying for a job. I didn't pretend, but I kind of looked at their job application. And they have a corporate human resources type approach to hiring. And I think that's the kiss of death, because that turns you into service industry. Guitars are rock and roll, rebellion, and you should never have a service industry, corporate America in bed with law enforcement. And I noticed they did credit checks. I did see they didn't do a drug test, which is good. I mean, you probably wipe out half the workforce, somebody said, but that's just bullshit, and you should hire people that play guitar and know guitar, and you shouldn't have a service sector human resources type application process where you do credit checks and all these kinds of things, because that hurts the quality of your workforce, and it turns you into some kind of Rite Aid or Walgreens, or it does turn you into like a Best Buy or a Walmart. I'm sure they try to hire people that know how to play the guitar, but I notice particularly a lot of the newer ones, they seem more like I just think whenever you have a corporation that adopts a human resources type approach to hiring people, you lose the the integrity of the institution, and you become a service sector big box like Best Buy or Walgreens or Rite Aid. So I do think, um, that was the difference. I think years ago, probably Guitar Center was more a rock and roll place, and that's important. Rock and roll, and it's not a bunch of kiss asses of human resources and corporate hiring practices with big protocols, and it's rock and roll, and you hire people that rock and roll. I mean, you want people that show up and everything, but their work history will tell you that, and you can try people out. But when they adopt that human resources type hiring, that really hurts that turns all that's what happens to all these companies. Then you become a service sector part of the economy, and that's really a drag. That's not rock and roll. I remember when I used to go into, the first few times I went into Guitar Center was probably in the early 2000s, and I remember they had the 1 millionth guitar in there. They used to do such cool stuff by Martin, and that thing was just spangled in inlay, but it was the 1 millionth guitar. I guess now they're on their 2 millionth guitars, so that tells you the exponential growth in guitar production. That says a lot right there. Took them from 1837 to 2004 for their first 1 million, and they already recently did their second million. So just in the last 15 years, they made another 1 million guitars, where in the first, 100 and, or whatever that is, 150 years, it took them to make 1 million. But they had the million, Guitar Center, they had the 1 millionth guitar. I remember when I first walked in there, they just had so many Martins. It was just like Martin heaven. And they had a glass case with the Martin in there. It wasn't the 1 millionth guitar. I'm not talking about that. They had a glass case with the Martin in there that was like $60,000 Martin. I don't know if it was vintage but I just remember looking at it. It was locked in a glass case on display, and I guess you could buy it, but it was, you couldn't just pick it up. But they had so many Martins, and just a wall full of really nice Fenders. And I do think they've let that slip. And I'll tell you, one of the things I think about that is, you think about this thing with brands, and people like Bain are very interested in brands. And I like brands. I mean, I'm a Fender person. And even if a guitar might be as good as a Fender, I kind of like Fender. I guess that's brand. But the brand has to come from history and quality. It can't be from just recognition in a more superficial sense of branding and marketing. So a company like Bain, they're interested in branding and marketing, and and they're always interested in growing. They add all these stores. They probably should have. Everybody says we're all armchair CEOs, I guess, but everybody says that they have music and arts. Now, why would in recent years, Guitar Center's been emphasizing beginner lessons and beginner guitars. Now, I thought that's what music and arts was for. And Guitar Center is supposed to be kind of rock and roll guitar, and I thought music and arts was kind of their entry level. But here they've been having all these lesson programs. And I taught in a music store. Lessons are great. I'm a big believer in lessons for kids, but I used to have 40 guitar students years ago. And one thing I remember is, for every 40 students, maybe 5 will still be playing in a year, which is fine. But and you need to serve that clientele. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with lessons, but I thought they had music and arts for that. So then they go with lessons, and they're trying to emphasize all these beginner guitars at Guitar Center, from what I understand. And it's good they have some on the shelves, but if that becomes their focus, instead of having really nice Tellys and Strats and Les Pauls and Martins and Taylors, then why do they have music and arts? And frankly, then they lose the edge in competing with mom and pop stores. So, but a company like Bain, they're just interested in branding and marketing. They've sort of elevated Guitar Center. And if you have a bunch of people that just have a passing interest in music, they probably just think having more more marketing campaigns and opening more stores, that's called growth. But meanwhile, a lot of uh, the quality of the kind of stuff they were doing. The other thing I did, I was in a couple of those King of the Blues contests, guitar contests. I didn't win, but I thought I held my own. But I was the old man up there. But that was so cool, And there are always people in the Guitar Center. This was maybe 10, 12, 15 years ago. All these people. They had a couple Marshall stacks and everybody from all ages, all walks of life, and maybe there were 15, 20 contestants. That was such a cool thing. They stopped doing that. They stopped doing a lot of the things that were kind of cool, which is too bad because. But the other thing I wanted to say is I do think that everybody kind of says, well, Reverb and Amazon or even Sweetwater is going to replace Guitar Center. Don't kid yourself. We saw the article, The Decline of the Guitar. I'm sure that's kind of part of this story that we don't want to talk about. I know they sold a ton of guitars in 2020. I bought some guitars, sitting around making little videos. That's how I started doing these videos, just, because I wasn't gigging like I used to all the time. So I started playing with these backing tracks. But like having lessons in a store or selling Squires, that's good. I'm not cutting that down, but that will never replace a really vibrant rock and roll culture and folk music, a really vibrant culture of great musicians. And I don't just mean technically great, but people with artistry and musicality. And you got to cater to them. That's what Guitar Center should be catering to. And I think a lot of us are kind of aging out. They're definitely. I mean, look at YouTube. They're younger people that play awesome. So awesome. They're great. But there's no live music. There's not much live music. When I was a kid and I used to play in a rock and roll band in the Detroit area, there were, and I didn't live in that big a town. I lived in Metro Detroit. But there were 3 or 4 places in that little town that had music 7 nights a week, 7 nights a week, and with bands like drums, And usually on Friday or Saturday night, they'd have really good bands, like really, and that was just a little town, and that was that wasn't unusual. Hotels, they used to have bands in there all the time. So there is a kind of a sea change in the culture, and don't kid yourself. Guitar Center might be going down, but they've got all those retail outlets. I think, but that's what I mean about Bain. They kind of buy a company with a famous name and a brand, and the companies they often buy are distressed, or they wouldn't be able to buy them. They wouldn't be up for sale, so they kind of bail these companies out, and they're usually doing it because of the brand, not because of any interest, and that's why. A store that is privately held by people that love music or have a family interest or something in it will always have an edge. But Guitar Center was a great store, and I really hope they don't need to do anything new. I think they just kind of need to be like how they used to be 15 years ago. They had great guitars in there. They had events in there all the time, and it was pretty cool. I was in those 2 King of the Blues contests, and I mean, there were some great players. They're probably some of the best players in the city. Were up there. Just throwing their hat into the ring, and it really brought people together. And I just remember those nights. When they had a little stage in the Guitar Center, but I mean, they were stocked with great guitars everywhere you looked. And I do think, after Bain bought them, it was maybe 7 or 8 years ago, they changed their floor rooms all around. And I never liked the way they changed their floor room because I also think it went along with a decrease in the amount of high quality guitars in the store. They still have good guitars. Like I said, you walk into a Guitar Center, they've almost got, I've never seen one where they didn't have a Les Paul or a Strat. They got pretty slim there, when they first opened up that for COVID. But that was an aberration, I'm sure, an anomaly. But I just kind of wanted to say that. I think all these people on the internet just saying good riddance to Guitar Center. My hometown of Detroit, lost 1.3 million people. it doesn't necessarily have to get better. I mean, we keep thinking, well, when live music comes back, and when the king comes again or whatever, the return of the king. But it doesn't necessarily have to happen. I mean, it's possible that, you know, when we're old, we'll remember, when there used to be a lot of live music, and it'll be kind of a historical memory. Um, and I'll tell you, one of the things that really would help that is corporatization of rock and roll. It's one of the, corporatization of rock and roll has hurt rock and roll. It hurt FM radio, and now it's hurting Guitar Center, which is, a pretty valuable asset in terms of rock and roll music. And music, not just rock and roll, but certainly rock and roll was the centerpiece of their foray. And corporate culture and a service economy approach and a human resources approach is the kiss of death to rock and roll music.